Hey everyone, Conley here, former Navy pilot, carrier qualified on the A-18E Super Hornet. If you've ever stood on the deck of a U.S. carrier at night, with the salt air burning your lungs and the deck crew moving like a choreographed dance under the glow of catapult lights, you know what chaos feels like when it's mastered. That's the kind of environment where aircraft like the Super Hornet prove their worth. But tonight, we're not talking about the jets I used to fly. We're talking about the plane that could one day meet it head-on. China's J-15T. A fighter built for a new era of Chinese carrier power, and one that Beijing claims can outmatch America's long-standing workhorse. The J-15T was unveiled in September 2025, just months before the Fujian, China's first electromagnetic catapult carrier, officially entered service. For the first time, China wasn't just copying Western designs, it was deploying them. The Fujian's EMALS launch system, the same technology America pioneered aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, allows jets to take off heavier, faster, and more efficiently than older ski jump ramps. That's a game changer, because the J-15T can now launch with full internal fuel, heavy anti-ship missiles, and electronic warfare pods, all at once. It means the Chinese Navy's carrier wings no longer have to choose between range or firepower. I remember when our Hornets launched from the deck of the USS Nimitz. Even with afterburners blazing, we still had to juggle fuel versus payload. The catapults made it possible, but physics always wins. With EMALS, you buy back some of that margin. China's engineers learned that lesson fast. The J-15T, descended from the Russian Su-27 flanker lineage, combines raw power with digital brains. Twin WS-10B engines pushing around 30,000 pounds of thrust each give it better acceleration than the F/A-18E's twin F-414s. Its active electronically scanned array radar is believed to have an aperture nearly twice the size of the Super Hornet's AN/APG-79, giving it a potential edge in detection range, especially against larger targets like tankers or early warning aircraft. And yet, it's not just about radar range or thrust numbers. On the flight line, pilots talk about energy management, the ability to hold speed in a turn, to regain altitude, to keep options open in a fight. The J-15T's airframe, derived from a high-energy flanker design, offers a higher thrust-to-weight ratio and a larger wing area. In theory, it should outclimb and out-accelerate a Super Hornet in clean configuration, but theory doesn't always survive deck ops. The F/A-18E's compact frame and folding wings were designed for the brutal life of carrier aviation. You can slam it onto the deck at 600 feet per minute, and it'll shrug it off. The Hornet was born to get dirty, get fixed, and fly again. That's where the U.S. Navy's philosophy differs from China's. We build for sustainment under fire. They build for maximum output under ideal conditions. Both have their logic. The J-15T reflects a nation still climbing the learning curve of carrier warfare. China's first two carriers, the Liaoning and Shandong, used ski jump ramps that limited takeoff weight and sortie rates. Pilots had to throttle carefully just to get airborne. The Fujian changes that equation. With EMALS, launch stress on engines drops, maintenance intervals improve, and sortie tempo increases. A carrier's true weapon isn't its jets, it's its ability to launch and recover them again and again without pause. The U.S. has spent decades perfecting that dance. China is trying to master it in less than 10 years. On paper, the J-15T's performance looks impressive. Combat radius estimates range between 800 and 1,000 kilometers, roughly double that of the legacy F/A-18E with standard tanks. It can carry China's PL-15 long-range air-to-air missile, rumored to reach 200 kilometers or more with active radar guidance, and the supersonic YJ-83 anti-ship missile. The U.S. Navy's Super Hornet, in comparison, typically carries AIM-120D missiles with a max range of around 160 kilometers, though that's classified territory. In a beyond visual range scenario, first-shot advantage often determines survival, and the J-15T's radar missile combination gives it serious reach. But here's the catch. Range means nothing if you can't find your target or stay alive long enough to shoot. That's where the Super Hornet's combat systems still shine. The Block 3's networking suite, known as the Distributed Targeting Processor and Tactical Targeting Network technology, allows it to share radar data in real time with E-2D Hawkeyes, Aegis destroyers, and even allied F-35s. It's not just a jet, it's a node in a kill web. I've flown in those networks. You feel like you've got 100 eyes in the sky feeding you threats before they ever appear on your own scope. The Chinese Navy is building something similar with their Integrated Maritime Surveillance Network. But they're still years away from matching the maturity of American systems like Link 16 or cooperative engagement capability. When it comes to engines, reliability is another silent killer. The F414 engine family has logged over 5 million flight hours with a safety record envied across the industry. The WS-10B powering the J-15T is improving, but reports from earlier flanker variants showed limited service life, around 1,000 hours before overhaul versus 2,000 for the F414. Carrier ops are brutal on engines. Salt air eats metal, and EMALS launches, while smoother still stress the turbines. China's engineers will need time to match that kind of durability. There's also the question of pilot training. The average U.S. Navy carrier pilot logs over 1,000 carrier landings in simulators and roughly 200 traps at sea before becoming a flight lead. The plan's training infrastructure is growing, but it's nowhere near as seasoned. China only began conducting full nighttime carrier operations in 2023. It's one thing to fly a jet off the deck in daylight. It's another to come back in a thunderstorm with a pitching deck and a single arresting wire between you and the sea. The J-15T might outperform on paper, but paper doesn't sweat. The A-18E is the product of 40 years of blood, salt, and flight deck evolution. Still, America's dominance is not guaranteed. The Navy's own modernization plan has hit delays. The F/A-XX 6th-generation fighter remains in classified development. The F-35C, despite its stealth advantage, has struggled with logistics and cost overruns, leading the Navy to order more Super Hornets just to keep carrier air wings viable. Meanwhile, China is sprinting. The J-15T is already paired with the stealthier J-35, and rumors suggest China's next-gen carrier fighter, tentatively called JXY, is in wind tunnel testing with an eye toward 2030 deployment. If those timelines hold, Beijing could field a mixed 4th and 6th generation air wing before the U.S. transitions out of the Super Hornet era. That's the part that worries me. It's not that the F/A-18E is a bad jet. It's that time is catching up. Every aircraft has an expiration date. The Super Hornet was a cheap replacement for the F-14 after the Cold War budget cuts. It did its job brilliantly, but it was never designed to dominate against near-peer threats indefinitely. The J-15T, in contrast, is a product of China's blank check era of military growth, where efficiency takes a back seat to raw performance. You see that in its maintenance profile. More power, more complexity, more downtime. But for a Navy that's still proving its global reach, that's an acceptable trade. When I look at both aircraft, I see a metaphor for their nations. The A-18E represents maturity, stability, and battle-tested discipline. The J-15T represents ambition, hunger, and speed of progress. If these two ever meet above the Pacific, the outcome won't just depend on who has the better jet. It'll depend on who commands the better network, the better sensors, and the better pilots. Because at the end of the day, a fighter's worth isn't measured by thrust or radar range. It's measured by who brings it home to the carrier. And that, so far, is something the U.S. Navy still does better than anyone on Earth. Fan 2 Hen. I think about the next decade of carrier aviation. I don't just see a duel between the A-18E and the J-15. I see a race between two entire systems, two ways of waging war at sea. The Chinese Navy is learning fast, absorbing lessons that took the U.S. half a century to master. The Fujian is their boldest statement yet, and the J-15T is its first true offspring. For China, this isn't just about matching the United States in numbers. It's about signaling that they can now project air power beyond the first island chain, that their carriers can strike from the Philippine Sea to the Indian Ocean. That's what makes the J-15T so significant. It's not the airplane itself, it's the ecosystem behind it. The U.S. Navy has built its reputation on decades of carrier dominance. Our carrier strike groups operate as integrated ecosystems. Aegis destroyers guard the perimeter, E-2D Hawkeyes act as the brain, and aerial refueling extends reach beyond the horizon. But the Chinese Navy is assembling its own version of that structure. Satellite networks like Tianlian provide beyond line-of-sight data links. The KJ-600 early warning aircraft, clearly inspired by the E-2, has entered testing, and Type 055 destroyers provide command and missile cover. When those elements synchronize, the J-15T could fight with the same kind of eyes-everywhere awareness that used to be our exclusive domain. And make no mistake, they're working toward that goal. The challenge for America is that our system, while unmatched, is aging. The Super Hornet fleet is now averaging over 6,000 flight hours per airframe, and by 2030, maintenance costs will skyrocket. I've seen what that looks like. Jets cannibalized for parts, crews working 18-hour days just to keep enough aircraft flight-ready for deployment. The Navy's plan to bridge the gap with the F-35C and later the F/A-XX will work, but not without turbulence. Meanwhile, China is fielding brand-new hardware built from digital design tools, additive manufacturing, and open architecture software. They're skipping some of the growing pains that we paid for in sweat and funding. The question I get from younger pilots is always the same. Could a J-15T actually beat a Super Hornet one-on-one? The honest answer is maybe, but that's not the right question. Air combat rarely comes down to a pure duel. It's a team sport. The Super Hornet, with its Link 16 and cooperative engagement capability, doesn't fight alone. It's fed by E-2D radar data, by satellites, by Aegis destroyers. The pilot can launch an AIM-1, a target he's never even seen on his own radar. The J-15T, operating under Chinese Doctrine, might rely more heavily on ground control and data links from nearby ships. That makes it formidable near home waters, but more vulnerable once it pushes far into the Pacific, where satellite coverage can be jammed or degraded. The U.S. Navy, on the other hand, has practiced fighting blind for decades. Our pilots train to lose the link, lose the radar, and still win the fight. There's also the human element, the part no algorithm can replace. The average Chinese naval aviator has a few hundred carrier landings in training. The average U.S. Navy pilot logs double that before earning his wings of gold. The U.S. system is brutal. Countless simulator traps, night quals, and wave-off drills. It's exhausting, but it produces muscle memory that saves lives. When the deck is pitching and the weather turns bad, that training separates the survivors from the statistics. China will get there eventually. They're already building dedicated carrier training centers on Hainan Island. But experience can't be rushed. Now let's talk about Doctrine. The Super Hornet was built around multi-role flexibility. It can intercept, bomb, and refuel all in the same sortie. The J-15T, by contrast, was built for air superiority and anti-ship strikes. It's more specialized. That's not necessarily a weakness, but it does mean the plan will depend on other platforms like the J-35 or future drones for versatility. The U.S. Navy's MQ-25 Stingray tanker drone is already extending the range of the Super Hornet by hundreds of miles. And once the Next Generation Air Dominance (NGAD) program matures, manned-unmanned teaming will redefine carrier warfare. Imagine a Super Hornet controlling 4 autonomous, loyal wingmen carrying missiles and sensors. That's where America is heading. China is experimenting with similar swarming drone concepts, but our head start in network architecture gives us a cushion. Still, I won't pretend the Super Hornet is invincible. In a long-range engagement, the J-15T's PL-15 missile, combined with its more powerful radar, could grant it first-shot advantage. That's a dangerous edge. The U.S. Navy is countering that with the AIM-260 Joint Advanced Tactical Missile, a new air-to-air weapon meant to exceed 200 kilometers in range. But it's not operational fleet-wide yet. If conflict broke out tomorrow, our pilots would rely on tactics, low observability, coordinated jamming, and the sheer skill of seasoned aviators to offset any hardware gap. From where I stand, the battle between the A-18E and the J-15T isn't a duel between equals. It's a snapshot of transition. The Super Hornet is the last of its generation, a bridge between the analog warriors of the Cold War and the digital pilots of the AI era. The J-15T is China's attempt to catch that bridge before it collapses. Both nations are sprinting toward the 6th generation. Adaptive engines, loyal wingmen, sensor fusion, and cloud-based command networks. Whoever arrives first won't just win the next battle. They'll define what air superiority at sea means for the next 50 years. And if you ask me, as someone who's watched sunrise after sunrise from 30,000 feet above a carrier strike group, dominance isn't about one jet beating another. It's about who controls the tempo, who decides when to fight and when to fade. The Super Hornet may be older, but it fights within a mature ecosystem of command, logistics, and allies stretching across the world's oceans. The J-15T may be faster and newer, but it still flies within a system that's learning to walk. The day those two meet in the same patch of sky, the outcome won't depend on thrust, radar, or missiles. It'll depend on who's trained longer, who's trusted their wingman more, and who's prepared for the chaos that never shows up on radar. And if history is any guide, that advantage still belongs to the pilots who trap on American decks. If you enjoyed this deep dive into modern carrier warfare, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our growing NavyCast community. Tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and which jet would you trust in a real fight? The F/A-18 Super Hornet, or China's new J-15T? Your thoughts keep this channel flying high. Thanks for watching. May God bless you and keep you safe.